And one of the things that David introduced as part of his process is how to eliminate price competition. David's been a business coach for over 12 years. He runs a series of workshops across Melbourne, and I'm very glad to welcome David to the webinar.
Thanks very much, Jim. I really appreciate the opportunity to come aboard. I know we've discussed price competition a number of times, and when you suggested would you be able to share that information with my clients, I thought it would be a great opportunity just to sort of give people a bit of an understanding of what we do, who we are, and how you can totally eliminate price competition. Because too often I meet people and they're stuck in this rut, and the rut is basically they're in a market where they're competing on price. The economy has a downturn and people are starting to fight for business, so they're starting to compete on price even more.
Yep.
The issue I found with that is a very downward spiral. So we're going to talk a bit about that and some of the strategies to overcome that, so that people have just got some ideas as to how they can overcome or eliminate those things. Now, during the webinar, if anyone has any questions, there's a question section in the control panel. And if we get them just to key in their questions, that way we can answer them as appropriate. But feel free, if anyone has any questions, just to throw them in, and we'll do our best to answer them as we go.
But of course, nothing too personal.
Nothing too personal?
Nothing too personal.
Like, what are you wearing? All right, so let's really start with a bit before we get going, a bit about myself. So as Jim mentioned, I've been coaching businesses for 12 years now, and I'm part of the Action Coach business coaching fraternity. In that time, I've won many awards along the way, but some of the most impressive ones, or the ones that I like talking about the most, are the ones where I get best client results. I suppose the main reason I'm proud of my awards is it demonstrates that what we've been doing works.
Yep.
Because often people talk to me about business coaching, they go, yeah, look, we're not really sure, if it's for us, does it really work? And look, the simple answer is it does work, but the question is it going to work for you?
Yeah.
So one of the things that we talk about a lot is, rather than just going straight into business coaching and do you need it, why don't we just show people how they can improve their businesses? And if they like what they see, and if they're interested in pursuing a relationship, then that's up to them.
Yep, fantastic.
So let's talk about the first, I suppose, elephant in the room is this whole idea of buying on price. See, one of the philosophies I teach people is that actually no one ever buys on price. Now, the immediate reaction I get to that is, well, no, you don't understand my industry.
That's not true,
It's not true. People in our industry buy on price, so you just don't understand. And here's a really important distinction. See, people never buy on price. What they do is they buy on value.
Yep. Now,
if we think about what that means, it just means that it's a different way of looking at the same problem. So when we're in a price competitive environment, what we're actually hitting up against is people who are concerned more about what they're getting for their money. Now, if it's price competitive, there's an underlying assumption. And the assumption is that the products are exactly the same.
Sure.
Now, in this day and age, we've got to really look at what value is so that we understand a bit more about, well, what is it that people are buying on? Because value is a combination of two things. So when we talk about what value is, we talk about value being the equivalent of quality divided by price.
Sure.
So let's talk a bit about this, Jim.
Yep.
So people say, well, people do buy on price. Well, it is partially true, okay, because value is made up of two things. It's made up of price and it's made up of quality.
Sure.
Now, if we look at quality, often people say, well, you don't understand because my product is commoditized. All right, it's just a standard product. It could be like an iPhone, for example.
Yep.
Whether I buy an iPhone from company A or company B doesn't make any difference. Now, the answer is the product is the same, but the underlying service or delivery or the retail presence is different. So what happens is the quality of the product is now attached to the quality of the delivery mechanism as well.
Yeah, but price is often used as the excuse as to why you lose business, isn't
it? Yeah. Now the simple thing to do as a business owner is to compete on price. But see, the underlying message that I'm giving to someone, if I start to cut my price to match the competitor, there's an underlying assumption that the product quality is exactly the same.
Yep.
So it's the easiest way to lose, because as soon as I drop my price, the customer will go down back to the competitor and say, well, look, I can get it cheaper from David.
Sure.
So what can you do for me?
Yep.
Now, the way to stop that happening is to stop thinking about price and start thinking about either quality or value. Because the way to sort of stem the bleeding is to actually start thinking, well, rather than just giving them a cheaper price, why don't I demonstrate what the difference is?
Yep.
And so I'll give you a really valid example is a lot of business owners now are confronted with this idea of people doing price check on premises.
Yes.
And I don't know if you do this, but I know I do. I walk into a shop and I look at a product And once I see the product on the shelf, I can jump on my iPhone and I can check online how much that product's selling for. Now, it sounds like it's not the right thing to do. But if I can save, like I'll give you an example. I was looking at some kitchen knives. And the kitchen knives I was looking at was it's a brand that the brand escapes my head, but it's called Global. Right. Global kitchen knives, quite expensive, So you're paying around $600-700 for a set of knives. Now I'd walk into a shop and they had the knives there. Now these knives are available on eBay. I've got an eBay app on my phone, which means I can scan the barcode of that product in the shop, and I can get a price comparison for how much I can buy
on the spot.
On the spot.
On the spot. Yep.
Now think about that. That is direct price competition. Now the retailer could actually just get upset with me and say, well, don't come in here and price check us. Or he can be smart about it and say, well, hang on, what is the quality difference between the product online and the product from the shop? Well, technically the product's the same. The difference is the delivery mechanism. See, when I buy from a shop, I buy from a person.
Yes.
They can give me service. They can give me a guarantee. They can give me take them home and try them. And if you're not happy, you can bring them back and we'll change them. So they can give me all of this added service that the online
return to point of purchase versus over the web. Yeah, sure.
All these things.
Yep.
Now, they didn't do that. What they did is I said, well, look, what's your best price? And they say, well, this is our best price, which it probably was. But they didn't articulate the value difference. So I'm looking at it going, well, I can save $100 by buying these online. Is there really any other difference? Now, if the retailer doesn't give me this story that differentiates the difference, then I'm likely to just go and buy them online.
Yep.
Because I'm going to save $100.
So the very proposition is not just the item itself, but it's all the ancillary backup service and so on that goes with that.
Yeah. Now, in a price competitive environment, we tend to think about price only.
Yes.
Rather than winding back and saying, well, hang on, it's not just the price, it's what am I getting? What is the value?
Yep.
Because when someone says you're too expensive, all they're really saying is that you're too expensive for what I perceive I'm getting.
Yes.
So unless you articulate the value, then they're just going to compare product to product.
Sure.
So one of the things I teach people is start thinking about what is the value you add to your product. Make sure it's articulated in your sales process so that you don't leave it to a product comparison.
So what does that involve, David, going from a commodity market into a specialised market? What's that involve, do you think?
Yeah. So see, it's a very good question, and a bit of soul searching needs to occur, because the very first thing is most people are very challenged by articulating their value. So they actually don't understand how to do it. They say, well, hang on, what value do we provide? We just have a retail shop. Actually, the product's the same.
Yep.
Now, that's a fact. The product is the same. So until we actually can articulate the value of the service that we provide and have it in writing, then we cannot do anything about this. Price competition, and just another interesting point, where does price competition come from? There's two things that cause price competition. Now, the very first one is having what's called a fully informed buyer. Now, what I mean by that is the buyer knows more about my product and service than I do, or the equivalent amount.
And with instant access to information at the touch of a button, that's getting more prevalent, isn't it?
Yeah. So if the buyer knows that the service from the shop is the same as the service from the online store, then price competition becomes the main point of difference.
Yes.
If the buyer now gets educated by the person who's retailing that their product buying the product from the retail shop is of more value, now the price competition starts to diminish.
Yes.
So a fully informed buyer who believes that the products are exactly the same, they're going to come down to price.
Yes.
So our job as a business owner is to start to increase the difference or the distinction between what our product is or our service is, or the combination of the two, versus the alternative choices out there.
Which is being giving the consumer all the information about the product and the service backup and so on, so they're fully informed about the complete package.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Because then it's very difficult to compare the two. Look, the second thing is the alternative choice of supply. Now, this one here is really just about if I can only buy a product from one place, then there is no price competition.
Yep.
Now, the only way that's going to happen in this day and age is to make sure my product is different from everybody else's. See, when we buy a phone, no one buys a mobile phone anymore.
No.
We buy a package.
Yes.
We buy an offering. We buy a service. And we get the phone for free. Now, there's a reason behind that. Because if we try to sell the phone, we come down to price competition because an iPhone is an iPhone. Right? There's very little distinction, and all the service is done by the iPhone, by Apple.
Yep.
So the guy selling the product can't add much value. So all the carriers got into this market and said, well, how do we add value? Well, we can create packages. And the phone becomes a part of that package.
Sure.
So, having an alternative choice of supply means that we breed price competition. So we've got to look at our product and make sure that we make it unique enough that no one else can compete on that product anymore.
Sure.
So let's talk a bit about how this all ties together. See, if we look at a product, if we look at a niche and what it is, you're in marketing. So what's your definition of a niche?
Well, a niche to us is finding a very specialised place in the marketplace, and we, I guess, part of that is to find your unique selling proposition. So we work
Yep.
with our clients for sustainable competitive advantage.
Yep.
To say, well, in that niche, then you need to promote this USP or SCA,
Yep.
so you can differentiate yourself in the marketplace to decommoditize the category.
Right. Okay. So this is exactly right. So my definition of niche is a little bit different. It's more pragmatic,
Yep.
right? To me, a niche is a place in the market where there's no price competition.
Sure.
If you have price competition, that means you haven't done all of those things that you've just articulated.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the biggest things I ask people is if you're going to do a marketing campaign, before you start pushing the button and spending money on advertising and promotion, make sure that you've actually defined your unique selling proposition, your position in the market, and make sure that you're in a place where there's no price competition.
Sure.
So to me, if you have price competitors, it means that you haven't defined your niche well enough.
Yep, I agree.
Because the perfect niche is where there's no one else.
Yes.
So no alternative choices supplied.
But very hard as markets get more atomized. It's very hard to find that niche in some instances.
Yeah, and this is why it's actually something that's ongoing. So there's no way that you can define a niche today and be safe in it, because as soon as you've created a niche, all your competitors are looking at it and saying, "Hang on, he's the only guy selling the product that way.
Yes.
If we did it the same way, we'd get half of the business."
Correct.
So this is a constant flow. So the trick here is to be innovative, right, and constantly be thinking of ways to keep recutting your niche and recutting your niche. And every time you do a marketing strategy, you've got to say, how am I going to be different to everyone else?
Yes.
Now, sometimes you'll get some time out of a particular niche. Other times it's going to be very short because the competitors cotton on very quickly. But as soon as you start feeling price competition, all of a sudden that tells me I don't care how unique your product, believe your product is. As soon as someone starts to say, well, I can get it cheaper, either they think it's the same as someone else's, or someone else has copied you.
It starts to go down the commodity track.
Right.
Yep.
As soon as you go down the commodity track, you've really got to start moving. Now let's talk about commodity. See, commodity is basically when a product, now no one cares where they buy it.
Yep.
And a classic example is if you want to go and buy salt. Do you really care what brand of salt?
No.
Salt is salt. Okay. So it's a very commoditized product. Same with flour. Same with many of the staple products that we use. Even things like iPhones. An iPhone's an iPhone. Now it is sort of a commodity, but it's also a monopoly at the same time.
Yeah.
Because it's either an iPhone or not.
Yes.
So products, when they're at commodity level, that's where price competition really kicks in. Okay, because it's going to come down to a few cents different to make a decision between product A and product B if they're identical in your mind.
Yep.
So as we move up from commodity, we move back to having a product which is defined. And the product being defined actually is still price sensitive. Remember we talked about service?
Service delivery. Yep.
Okay. So when we combine a product and a service, all of a sudden we have something that is now distinguishable.
Yes.
And so we combine these two things and we call them an offering. And what an offering is, it's like when you buy a phone on a plan and all of a sudden you don't own the phone. You just basically bought a plan and you got the phone for free.
Yep.
And in 2 years' time, you get a phone call saying your plan's over, you can get a new phone. How much? Free. You go, this is great, a free phone. Now, we know it's not free.
No.
Right? But we also know that it's bundled into an offering which appeals to us because it's either a business plan or it's a light user plan or whatever the plan might be, which means that it's enough to sort of keep us within that contract.
Yes.
Now, is it the best contract for us? We don't know.
And those people understand that going through that whole research process is quite complex. So it's easier to stay with your current supplier versus go out and go to the marketplace and try and negotiate these new contracts.
Right.
Yeah.
So the more sophisticated the offering is, the less likely people will price shop.
Yes.
Because people don't want to move because they don't like the inconvenience of moving. So we've really got to be wary of this. But still, if you look at this way of looking at products and services, they're still considered offerings and there still is a potential for price competition. This next stage where we move over the next line is what's called changing your product from product or service to an experience.
Yes.
Now, there's a little distinction here because an experience is truly unique. And what I mean by this is people will pay a premium for an experience. You know, and there was an interesting restaurant over in New York, and it was always rated in the top 3 restaurants in New York. And the food critics could never understand because the food was pretty average.
Yep.
And so one of them went down there and they sort of said, we've got to find out what's going on with this restaurant because the food's not that great. And what they realized is that the restaurant was owned by a supermodel.
Right.
And this supermodel had made a distinction and said, people don't come to a restaurant for food. They come to a restaurant for a dining experience.
Yep.
So she employed only supermodels to work as waiters and waitresses within the restaurant.
Yep.
And the reasoning behind that, she said, people come to the restaurant for an experience. They want to experience how what it's like to be in a movie. And so the whole thing is choreographed. You go to this restaurant and it's an experience from the minute you walk in the door.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, that little distinction makes her truly unique.
Yep.
But people don't look at the price. They look at how they felt as a result of going through this restaurant experience.
Sure. Understand.
So really it comes down to, you want to start considering your product or service to be an experience at minimum if you want to eliminate price competition.
Yep.
Okay. So thinking about how your client goes through this relationship with you, how can you make the experience a memorable one, a unique one?
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of this comes down to customer service.
Yes.
A lot of it comes down to how you handle the different interactions with your client.
Mm-hmm.
But people are starting to expect more.
Yes.
And the product's just the product. We don't want the product anymore. We want the product plus
all the ancillary things. Yeah.
That's right.
Yep.
The frills around the product.
Yep.
See, as we keep moving up this ladder, we start moving to transformation. Now, when I talk about transformation in product or service, if your product changes people's lives,
mm-hmm.
what happens is they become very loyal to the product. They become evangelistic about that product. Now, most products have the opportunity to do this.
Yes.
But we don't get to this level. We're too busy fighting at that bottom level, at the commodity level or the product level.
Mm-hmm.
So we're trying to compete on price. When we start to realize that people value service, and if we give them a fantastic experience, we can transform the way they live.
Yes.
So, I keep using Apple as an example, but there's a reason behind that is Steve Jobs did a phenomenal job.
Mm.
He sells the most expensive computers on the market.
Yes.
They're not the best, they're not the fastest, but they are the most expensive, and the following is so loyal.
Mm.
Once someone becomes a Mac person, you don't want to try and change that person.
Move. And their international marketing is standard across the world.
Yeah. So we use it as an example because these guys have led the way in basically innovation.
Yes.
And what they're doing is they're really sort of got people to this transformation stage where people just become addicts.
Yep.
iPhone, iPad, everything. Now, it's not the best product. Tablet computers have been around for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
In the last 3 years, Apple has taken 80% of the market.
Extraordinary.
Yeah. Now, is their product the best? Definitely not. But you know what? They've got apps.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They've got nicer colors. It's
iTunes,
made of aluminium.
the whole thing's a complete package.
Right.
Yep.
So what they've done is they've created basically what's called a transformational experience. Now, the big thing here is it's predictable too. They know what's going to happen with this product. Now, people don't like Apple product because it's closed. Right?
Yes.
It's closed source. Basically, it works with other Apple stuff. It doesn't work with anything else.
Yep.
Now, that can be a negative or a positive. So the positive is that it just works. The negative is it's not as adaptable as a PC.
It limits your applications, yeah.
Limits your application. Yeah. So people are always going to argue two sides. But the winner for Apple is they're laughing all the way to the bank. Because I don't know if you know the statistics, but the Apple store in Chadstone turns over more revenue than the whole of David Jones put together.
Really, yeah?
Yeah.
But you can walk past that shop on a Friday night and there's a queue at the door.
Yeah.
Walk in DJs, there's no one there. So the brand loyalty must be extraordinary.
That's that part of it. The other part is you'll notice there's more blue T-shirts in an Apple store than there is anyone else.
Yeah.
That's their customer service. Because they understand how important the service is and the attention to detail and making sure if you walk in there's someone to help you.
Sure.
So they've got the whole idea of retail nailed.
Yep.
And so the other irony is that even though one store turns over more than all of David Jones, they have only a very limited number of products.
Yes.
Right? Their product range could fit on a desk.
Yep, correct.
And so they still outperform because they understand that people are buying an experience and more importantly, a transformational experience.
Sure.
So when we get to this predictable transformation, we can do risk reversal. Now, the example I give here is, if people are selling a product or service, if you know the result of using your product, if you know, for example, as a marketing organization, you know that in a certain sector that you can generate a certain number of leads, which will turn into clients, which will turn into profit for an organization.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you knew to that level what the result was and it's predictable, you can now do what's called risk reversal,
sure,
which is offering things like guarantees.
Guarantees, yep.
So now guaranteeing deliverable of a product is a high risk situation for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the only reason behind that is they haven't done their numbers
mm-hmm.
or they're not consistent in their delivery. So it might deliver a different result to a different person. Now, some industries, it's very easy to get predictable results. And a lot of people don't recognize that this is a value proposition that can be turned into a guarantee. Because people are looking for risk reversal.
Yes.
So I'd rather go to an accountant that says it's going to cost you $500 to do your tax return. It doesn't matter how many hours it takes. because he knows that he can do it within less than that required amount of time.
I guess pharmaceuticals are down that track as well, aren't they? They do clinical trials and tests for many years just to say to people that when you take this particular drug,
Yep.
the likely outcome is going to be this.
Yep.
Yep.
And they have statistics, and there's a lot of conditions around it.
Yep.
But they're basically saying do this and this will happen.
Yep.
And you'll notice a lot of commoditized products, like we talk a lot about like the weight loss programs,
Mm-hmm.
and they guarantee a result.
Mm.
They say follow our program, you're guaranteed to lose 1 kilo a week for the next 3 weeks.
Yep.
Now the program's challenging, but they know their numbers.
Through tried systems.
So they have predictable transformation.
Sure.
So the other point I wanted to bring up today, Jim, was this whole concept of stratifying clients.
Yes.
Now, I'm not sure if your clients are familiar with this term. Are you familiar with the term stratify?
Well, we are, but perhaps explain to people who are listening to us.
Okay. So people say that all sounds great. Okay, creating predictable transformation, but where do we actually start? What do we do? Now, the first thing I'd suggest you do is you look at your current client base, because in any client base, there's different kinds or different quality of client. And what we need to be looking for is, well, what sort of clients do we have? How do we categorize them? Now, some people use the A, B, C, D method, but I find that it's tricky because what does that mean? You know, what is an A-grade client? So when I talk about stratifying clients, I start with what's called a commodity client. Now, commodity client to me is someone who basically comes to you and buys on price.
Yes.
Now, sometimes we love those clients, but other times they're a pain in the neck.
The investment for the return is not there.
No. Now, in a price competitive market, if people are coming to you because you're the cheapest, chances are they're price driven. So as soon as they find someone cheaper, they're not loyal to you anymore.
No, correct.
They're loyal to the price. So the commodity client is a very dangerous one to have, and it can set a false sense of security for people where they think things are going all right.
Yep.
So we need to start thinking about, well, that's pretty much the bottom level. Now, once we get a commodity client, we have a job, and our job is to get them to come back.
Yes.
So we move from commodity to repeat business, because as a repeat client, that means that they tried our product or service out, they liked it, and so much so that they're actually willing to give us a second go. Just think about how many restaurants you've been to where you've actually tried the restaurant out and it was okay. It wasn't great, but you just don't go back there.
No.
So one of the key things with marketing, and I encourage business owners to do this all the time, is to think about once I get someone in the door, you might have a lost leader, just a promotion or an offer that gets people in the front door.
Sure.
But what's your strategy to get them to come back again? Because as a repeat client, what they've done is they've actually shown you some loyalty.
Yes.
And that loyalty then can get built even further to get them to become what's called a loyal client. Now, repeat means come back a second time. Loyal means come back every time they need that product or service.
So it goes from transactional to relationship based.
Right.
Yep.
So really, if you look through your clients, you're probably going to have a fair amount that's in the commodity end. When you do a promotion, they take advantage of the promotion. You're going to have some that come back twice or maybe even 3 times, but they don't use you every single time.
No.
So then what we look for is, well, who are the loyal customers, which means every time they need the product or service that you offer, they come to you.
Yes.
And if they're doing that, then you know that you've got a client for life. But it doesn't stop there, because the next step up is what's called a missionary. Now,
or a zealot.
Or a zealot. That's it. So it's basically someone who basically sings your praises to everybody.
Yes.
So there is a distinction between a loyal client who basically comes to you every single time they need your service, and someone who actually not only comes to you but brings all their mates.
Yes.
And what we want is we want to get more and more missionaries within our organisation.
Sure.
Now, the way to do it is to first pick out the ones that already are.
Yep.
So when we talk about stratifying clients, is I would actually print out a list of clients for every customer that you're working with.
Yep.
And I would start grading them. And I'd say, who's a commodity, who's a repeat, who's a loyal, who's a missionary. Once we find out who they are, then we can start working on how do we...
Strategies around those.
Strategies to move them up the ladder.
Yep, sure. And it's going to be information and communication and relationship building techniques and those sorts of things.
Absolutely.
Yep.
See, because what happens is commodity clients, one of the issues is that they do defect.
Of course.
Now, the issue with someone defecting as a client is once they've defected, it's over. So if someone comes to you on price, and you don't do your damnedest to get them up to repeat, to get them to come back again, as soon as they lose contact with you, they're not going to listen to you anymore.
Yep.
So you've got no opportunity to build relationship with someone who's gone.
Yes.
And so this whole defected column is or row is really quite important. And I'll put this little sort of matrix down the side of this slide just to demonstrate. So some of the key aspects of building clients into a missionary is to have frequency of communication.
Sure.
And to have trust.
High trust. Yep.
High trust. So a defected client, we've got zero frequency of communication and we've got zero trust.
Sure.
They don't like us. We don't even know why. They just left. And if we try and ring them, they ignore our call.
Yes.
They don't respond to our email.
Yep.
It's really, really hard to recover a lost client.
Sure.
See, at commodity level, the frequency is really low and the trust is really low. So we're going to start doing...
So it's transactional.
Transactional.
Yep.
Now, at that point in time, you have an opportunity. And the opportunity is to build the relationship. So what is the strategy that the organization is using to take that commodity client, transactional client, and actually get them to like you?
Yep.
Okay. Now, getting them to like you is about frequency of communication without going over the top. So, you know, sometimes you'll buy a product, you'll get spammed to death. All right. That's a great way to get someone to defect.
Yep.
So it's about appropriateness of communication. So
values like integrity and honesty and those sort of things too, I imagine would come into play.
Yep.
Yep.
Customer service calls.
Yep.
So I just rang to make sure you're happy with the product. Is there anything we can help you with?
Sure.
By the way, there's some other sort of options.
Yep.
And just starting to build that repeat business.
Yep.
Because once we get them back a second and third time, our frequency becomes high. And once we move into high frequency, then all of a sudden we've got this opportunity to build trust. Now, trust comes from having lots of interactions with someone where they keep delivering on what they promise.
Yes.
Now, as a supplier to a customer base, my job is to build trust. And the way I build it is to do everything I can to make you happy.
Yep.
And not only that, I give you proactive ideas. So I think about not only what makes you happy, I think about, well, what else can I do to help you achieve your outcome or goal?
So innovation in process, innovation in thought. Yep.
Thinking outside of just the product sale.
Yep.
Start thinking about the life cycle of the client and how we can anticipate their moves.
Sure.
And what this does is it starts to build a level of loyalty because we've moved to high frequency and medium trust. Now, we don't stop there. All right? We'll have a lot of clients that park themselves as loyal. But to get mission...
And that for a lot of businesses is very good, isn't it?
That's
have a foundation of loyal clients is fantastic outcome.
Exactly. Anything over commodity is good. But loyal is great. Missionary is amazing. Because when we get people to missionary level, what happens is these guys now trust us totally. It's extreme trust, extreme frequency. What that means is they'll ring us anytime they have a question, even if it's not related to your product or service.
Sure.
When you have relationships like that with people, they are going to recommend you as an inside running. Listen, you know what? You're thinking about marketing, you've got to talk to Jim.
Yep.
He's awesome. Let me actually call him now and see if he's available.
Yep.
That's the level of communication you want out of a missionary.
Yep.
Because these people are now your salespeople.
Sure.
And they're out there in the marketplace. They're actually selling for you. They're identifying opportunities. And they're making your job so much easier.
Yep.
So we've really got to be thinking about how we stratify. Look, the last one I wanted to talk to is this question of what business people are in.
Sure.
And I think the issue is most people think they're in their trade of their product or service. And this is something where people need to get their head around and change. Because you're not in the business of your product and service. So you're in the business of what's called client intimacy.
Yes.
Now, if you think about what that means, see, when we move from that base level of repeat to missionary, or to loyal to missionary, what we're trying to do is get an intimate relationship with our client.
Yep.
We live in a day and age where there's so much noise, there's so much communications going on with the outside world, emails coming in at a million.
People are bombarded.
Totally. They're actually starting to look for people they trust that they can communicate with and they can just have simple contact with.
Yep.
There's no stress. They're not trying to sell anything.
Exactly right.
So here when we talk about client intimacy, it's really just so simple. Find the best clients, work to make them missionaries, make sure that they're raving fans because they're going to be talking to their friends. They've got Facebook pages. They've got all sorts of social connections and they're going to be talking about you.
Correct. Yeah.
So, see, when we work on these levels, price competition goes away.
Yeah.
Because you think about it, a referral walks in your front door, how important is price? You know, it's secondary. Oh, Jim, you know, John recommended I come and see you. He said you could help me.
Yep.
He's not asking about price.
No, it's the outcome.
The outcome.
The outcome.
Okay. So it's a bit of a mindset shift, Jim, but it's sort of, it is the way of the future. I think price competition, as it stands, will never go away. And those people that don't know how to combat it by improving the quality or the value of their product are destined to be in trouble.
Sure, I agree. So a bigger question, David, in terms of the internet being that all things to all people, and that is often the price-driven factor, how do businesses handle that?
Well, the internet is just a media.
Yep.
So what's happened is, you know, it's what's called a structural change. It's not going away. You know, there's cyclic change. The economy at the moment is low, but that's going to come back, right? Property will
as
come
it
back
always does.
as it always does.
Sure.
The internet will not go away.
Sure.
So a business owner these days has to be very savvy on what the internet is
Mm-hmm.
and how to cope with this strategy of people checking prices instantly.
Yep.
The way to do it is to be responsive to this and not say, "Oh my God, they're going to check online."
Mm.
The question is, let's assume everyone's going to check online.
Yep.
So how do we combat it face on?
So add the value at that level.
Absolutely.
So we can talk about propositions about value and quality and guarantees and those sorts of things.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Assume people are going to price shop.
Yep.
Give them tools to compare differences.
Mm.
So don't just give people price on a product. Give them the whole benefit statement that explains what the service is and what the value is of your proposition up front.
Sure.
So when they go and price compare, they go, well, I can get it cheaper online, but it doesn't come with this guarantee. It doesn't come with this service. It doesn't come with a changeover if you're not happy, point of contact. So now they've got some real tools to compare the pricing.
Yes. Yeah.
Because then what it does is it moves you back into niche.
Yep.
So look, the reality is that's one of the most important things you can do. The other thing with internet is make sure you're on there. Because when people are doing their research,
it's the first place they go.
Everyone now Google stuff, right? So if I'm going to buy a new computer, I'm going to Google computers.
Yep.
Now, the things I'm going to find online, I'm not going to go straight to a computer store online. I'm going to go to the review websites. I'm going to go to the people who have tried product out and they're giving us some indication of what we think is the right product.
Sure.
So make sure there's lots of content online that people can find. Things like white papers, ebooks, blogs. All of this information, it sounds like it's an overwhelm and it's a headache. But the truth of the matter is that if you're not out there when people are doing their research, they're not going to find you when they're ready to buy.
That's right.
Or if they do, they're going to find you and be more astute about what's in the market than you are. And that's why you're going to lose on price. So, look, I think the internet's here to stay. I think having a savvy marketing company who understands how you plug a particular product or service into that conduit is critical.
Sure. So you had to sum up the last half an hour, David, in a nutshell. What would it be? What was your kernel around price competition?
Yeah, okay. Like I'll go back to the first slide I put up. It's the issue is people never buy on price. Because as soon as I concede that people buy on price, I've got nowhere to go except for change the price. If I recognise that people are buying on value, it opens the door. Because the next question is, how do I add value to my product? How do I add value to my service? Which is a much better question to ask. Because where marketing used to be used to create leads, see, now marketing is used to create value.
Yes.
Because people need to be educated on your product or your service or how you deliver it so they can distinguish, why am I paying more?
Sure.
Because the last thing I want people to do is be the cheapest in the market. You should be up towards the more expensive end of the market.
Yeah. In that niche.
In a niche, right? So be in a niche and create some value. And if you don't know how to do it, speak to someone who can help you.
Sure.
Because everyone else is going to be out there having the same issue. And if you compete on price, you're just putting yourself in a situation where other people can counter-compete back on price. And no one wins in that game.
No.
So look, I suppose the last thing, Jim, there's lots of valuable information on my website.
Sure.
And what I'll do for all the attendees today, I'll send out an email with a link
Fantastic.
to the website.
Yep.
There's I've created a 10-video e-course which teaches people how to build a business. Now, for everyone who's listening today, it's going to be complimentary.
Fantastic, David.
So I'll send them the link. They can sign up for that straight away, just to get some more information.
Okay.
Because it is a market where people, it's a new era, it's a new market, the way the internet is right now.
Sure.
The economy has accelerated the change, and people need to really learn what is possible and what they can do before they can sort of make any decisions on this.
Sure, understand. Well, David, thank you very much. For those who are listening, I have met many business coaches over the years, and David has stood above the rest as a bloke of great integrity. He has a lot of commercial experience, and I thank you for your time today.
Thanks very much, Jim.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much, everyone, for listening as well. Cheers.
Well done, mate.